stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Ideanthro, and welcome back to another That's Like WUSD episode, where we take an idea or a concept that we have read about, heard about, or otherwise come across and relate it back to water-sensitive urban design. In this episode, we are going to be talking about firing bullets and then cannonballs. What the heck are you on about, Jack? Okay, this is a concept, or this is terminology that the author Jim Collins, now he's an author who writes about what makes businesses or companies successful. This is some terminology that the author Jim Collins uses to describe a common trait of successful companies. And what this means, I'm going to explain this to you first in a business sense, and I'm going to use Jim's own analogy for this to make it concrete, and then we're going to relate it back to water-sensitive urban design. So the concept, or what businesses who employ this do, is that when they are looking for new business opportunities, they throw out a whole bunch of little kind of feelers into different business areas to suss out whether there's business opportunities there. So maybe they think there's a business opportunity over here, so they go and invest a little bit of money in that to see if they can make it work, to get a feel for it. Essentially, it's a pilot project, right? But they don't just do one, they do lots and lots and lots and lots of them. So they fire lots of bullets, lots of pilot projects out, see what's successful, what's not, and then when they do get one that's successful, they go all in on it, right? That's the firing of the cannonball. So they're going out and they're going, look, okay, try a whole bunch of different things a little bit. None of these gambles, either individually or collectively, are enough to sink us if they all go wrong. But if we do get one that all the results come back really promising, then we go all in on it with a really big bet that's hopefully, based on the evidence, based on the fact that the pilot was successful, going to pay off really big. So essentially pilots, but running multiple pilots at once and then going all in. The fire bullets and then cannonball analogy is like this. Imagine you're a pirate sailing the seas in your wooden sailing ship, and you're about to engage in a battle with the naval forces of the day. And so your ships are coming in to have their fight, and you've got to line up your cannons to fire them and try and sink the other ship. Now you could get your biggest cannonball and stick all your gunpowder in it, take one big shot, and if you hit, you sink them, you're out of there clean. The problem is you put all your eggs in one basket, and if you get it wrong, you get it wrong. So instead what you do is you get just a little bit of gunpowder and a small cannonball, and you fire a sighting shot. You see if you've got your target in line. You get your trajectory. You test if you're going to be able to hit. And maybe if the first one, if your range isn't right, if your angle isn't right, you fire another little one, and another, and another, and another. And then when you've got all those things right, you put all your gunpowder into one big cannonball and shoot it, you sink your opponent and you're off. That's the fire bullets. Small cannonballs, and then cannonballs. Big cannonballs. That's the concept here. So essentially, lots of little pilot projects, see what's successful, go all in on whatever was. Let's now relate this back to water-sensitive urban design, because what this makes me think of is this is a lens through which I think we can view some of the early days of water-sensitive urban design. Now, this doesn't mean there's a risk when you do this, because now that I have this idea, there's a risk that I'm going to look back at the narrative of water-sensitive urban design and just cherry pick the bits from the history to make them fit the analogy or the narrative that I've got in mind here. So bear in mind there is a risk with that, but I still think we can potentially learn some stuff here. Because when I look back at the history of water-sensitive urban design and I go out and inspect old assets, what you see is this, that when you look at old water-sensitive urban design, there is far more variation in the types of stormwater treatment that we see, and variation in the designs within any given type. And then over time, things have narrowed down to this very much, almost everything's a bioretention system, and fundamentally they all look very similar. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you could interpret that through the lens of fire bullets and then cannonballs, which is, in the early days of water-sensitive urban design, we had different ideas potentially how to treat stormwater, and we're trying them all out a little bit, see if that works. I'm not so sure. Trying that over there, see if that works. Oh, that was a little bit better. That was a shocker, that one. Let's not do that again. Try that one. Oh, that worked really well. Let's pick that. And in the process of doing this, we've narrowed in on bioretention systems. And we've narrowed in. See, here's the thing. That was a stormwater treatment technology analogy, but you can argue the same thing in that there were different types of stormwater treatment objectives initially, the less variation potentially there, different types of policy settings, all different local governments in Southeast Queensland potentially having different stormwater policies, and then we had the state planning policy, which brought everyone much more back in line. So there's a situation early on of trying lots of different things, and when we looked like we had something that was bound to work, we've gone all in on it through the SPP, bioretention systems, the water by design guidelines, and so on and so forth. Now, from Jim Collins's idea here, this is not a bad thing, and I don't think it was a bad thing in water-sensitive urban design either. In that, it took us from having nothing WUSD to having the WUSD we know today, which fundamentally has done a lot of good things. The problem is, it hasn't done enough. It hasn't solved the problem. There's a lot that's wrong with it, and there's a lot of the problem of urban waterway health that this current paradigm doesn't deal with. And so it took us a step in the right direction, but this concept of fire lots of cannonballs then narrow in only gets us there once. And from business, that can be entirely successful. Because let's be honest, if you're a good business person and you try lots of ideas, pick the ones that are going to make you a lot of money, go all in on them. And then if you milk those for as long as they make sense and then roll up your business and sell off all your assets, you can make a really good profit out of doing that and be gone and ride off into the sunset. Because you don't necessarily need your business to last in perpetuity to do what you need it to do. But the problem with water sensitive urban design is we do need it to last in perpetuity. Because it's actually about making our cities and our urban spaces sustainable forever. Forever. And so that's a fundamental difference in this analogy. And so we have a situation here where I think part of what's gone astray, and I've said this in different terms before on these videos, part of what's gone astray with water sensitive urban design is the fact that we've had this initial crack at firing lots of bullets and finding our cannonball and firing it. But in the process of then embedding this all into policy, we've hamstrung ourselves, so it's very, very hard to actually fire more bullets anymore. Because anyone who's unhappy with the status quo, but putting in applications to the DA process, is kind of hamstrung into just building more cannonballs, more bioretention systems as they already were. And if you want to try and do something different, you really have to go all in on a completely untested cannonball, because you've got to do it through the DA process. Yes, okay, councils on their own individual processes, things like Manicom's ZAM WUSD systems, things like councils dabbling in street trees, things like this are examples of councils firing some bullets, but they're not happening in large enough numbers to really test the water out. Because we don't know, I talked about this before as well, the future is fundamentally unpredictable. We have a tendency as humans to predict the future based on past events and slightly tweak them and extrapolate that forward. That's not what actually happens. When you do that, you lead to statements like the head of IBM several decades ago saying that there'll only ever be a market for like half a dozen computers in the world, because he extrapolated the current computer and projected it into the future, not realizing what they were actually going to turn into. The point here being that because we can't know the future, we can't get away with just firing a few bullets to find the next iterations of water sensitive urban design. We have to cast off our bullets really widely, disperse them wide, because we can't predict. We have to fire in all sorts of directions without actually trying to predict what's going to be likely. If we try and predict and just fire a couple of bullets, we'll probably get it wrong, because we're fundamentally terrible as a species at predicting the future. And so, the lesson to take away from this is, how are we doing ourselves? It's not even a lesson, it's a question. Are we doing ourselves as much good as the current bullet that is conventional and contemporary water sensitive urban design, as good as that bullet is, by insisting on making the majority of our assets, and when I say insisting, we're not doing this consciously, we're doing it subconsciously through planning and policy and the like, by insisting that we continue to fire the same cannonball, are we actually doing ourselves more harm than good, because we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to have a realistic chance of finding the next big breakthrough, the next change, the next iteration in water sensitive urban design, the water sensitive city, whatever terminology you want to put on it. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. By going in so hard, going all in on the current cannonball that is water sensitive urban design, are we hamstringing ourselves and getting rid of our opportunities to realistically have a chance to come up with the next iteration of water sensitive urban design? What do you think? I would love to hear what you think. Let me know. There's a few ways you can find me. Find me on ideanthro.com. You can find me on Facebook, Insta. We don't really use Insta that much. Twitter, use it a bit. And LinkedIn, more active on LinkedIn. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for watching. I'd love to hear what you think. As always, have a good one. We will see you next time.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro, improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.